Shalom, Erev Tov, everyone. We have been discussing the last couple of sessions that we had. We encountered a few Haredi attitudes towards Medinat Israel. The first one was Satmar, totally negative. The middle one, I would say, was Rav Shach, who had some positive, but even that was kind of within criticism and being negative, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Chabad, who had more positive to say, but also couldn't totally identify with the state of Israel because of different things that are not properly in place according to Torah in his perspective. And all of this was a background to challenge ourselves with our own attitude towards Medinat Israel, which we identify with, which we feel part of, which we want to, on the one hand, strengthen in its Jewish identity or in its adherence and keeping to the laws of the Torah. And how do we do that? And how do we put the things together? So I would like to address this Haredi criticism as a challenge for us, something that we have to take into account and think of, and not just to throw it by the wayside because it's these Haredim that we don't agree with. Satmar is difficult to do that with because Satmar is totally negative, and it's saying that we shouldn't, we can be here as individuals, we're allowed to live. I always say this, and students have a very difficult time understanding this, high school students, that there are Satmar Hasidim who live in Israel. So if they're opposed to Israel, how is it that they live in Israel? And I explained to them that their understanding is that a Jew can live in Eretz Israel, but there shouldn't be a Medinat Israel. And those who go all the way don't even have Israeli citizenship. So they live in Eretz Israel without being citizens of the state of Israel. But in any case, that's very extreme, being totally against having a state here, and it's hard to address that. But let's address the criticisms of, for instance, the Rav Shach, who said that, what are you so excited about having a state, an army, a national anthem, a flag, but it's not keeping Shabbat, and it's not only is it not good enough, it's worse when there is an individual Jew in Galut who doesn't keep Shabbat. That's an individual, but here we have a Jewish state that's not keeping Shabbat. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe said, yes, it's legitimate to create a state and to have an army, and it's even positive because it enables Jews to keep mitzvot and to learn Torah, and it saves Jewish lives, but it's still missing so much that we can't be very excited about it. I don't know why, Michael, you have no audio from audio. Me. Does everybody else hear me?
Yes.
I don't know, Michael. Can anyone help?
We're good.
Oh, no.
Okay, good. Okay, so what I want to say is that there is truth in the criticism. There is, I think, I would like to hear other people, but I think there is truth in the Haredi criticism of what's missing Torah-wise, Jewish identity-wise in Medinat Israel. And yes, it is part of what is missing and part of what we try to influence. We'll discuss, next stage will be to discuss how to do that. But I really do think that there are things that are missing and that are negative. Yes, there are things that are negative about the state of Israel. There are things that are even in a certain way, possibly, I don't know if worse, but in some ways worse, because, sometimes Israeli citizens, for instance, go for all kinds of reasons to other countries. Let's say that they're not going to, as the ancient Hebrew word relocation, they're not going for a relocation, they're going to do a doctorate or sent by their workplace for a few years and so on. But when they're in Israel, they don't feel a need to be connected to community, to mitzvot, to chagim. When they're outside of Israel, they connect to the local Jewish community and sometimes to the Jewish celebrations, to the Jewish calendar, because outside of Israel in Galut, they feel that this is their connection. And when they're here, they don't need that connection. So in some ways, there are disadvantages to being in Israel. Also, sometimes it's easier. Some people have said this, and I would not decide to live in Galut because of this, but I understand what they're saying. Sometimes it's easier to keep your Jewish identity in Galut because the world around you is Goyim, is non-Jews. And so, you go to work with them, but that's us, that's them. You can even have social connections, and I don't have anything against social connections with people who are not Jewish, but you know that there's a limit to it, and it helps you preserve your Jewish identity, your children's Jewish identity. In Israel, because we're all Jewish, not all, but majority are Jews, the people you meet, the people you serve with in the army, the people you work with, they're Jews, and you love them, and you want unity with them, etc., etc., etc. And it's all true, and it's all positive, and it's all beautiful, but that kind of blurs the boundaries and the differences between being committed to Judaism according to Torah and not being committed in that way. So there are some disadvantages. But nonetheless, we cannot measure the state of Israel only by that prism. The state of Israel is also the fulfillment of psukim that are said in the Torah. It's the fulfillment of gathering of the exiles of Kibbutz Galuyot. It's the fulfillment of prophecies of Am Yisrael settling and flourishing in Eretz Yisrael. It's a fulfillment that has never been fulfilled before. Promises that were made in the Torah 3,000 years ago by prophets, 2,700, 2,600, 2,500 years ago. They were never fulfilled in all these thousands of years, and they're being fulfilled today. So can we overlook that? We can't overlook that. So there are positive aspects. There's an aspect of glorifying Hashem's name, sanctifying Hashem's name, Kiddush Hashem. For instance, Rav Soloveitchik in his famous drasha, which was called Kol Dodi Dofek, about using the parable of the lover, the man in the love song of Shir HaShirim, Song of Songs, knocking on his beloved's door, and Hashem is knocking on our door several times and showing us that He wants our love. He wants us to restore and put back our love in Eretz Yisrael. One of the things he says is that the state of Israel is a Kiddush Hashem. He brings the example that in the news, I don't know if this is true today, but the drasha was given in 1956, that in 1956, sometimes in America, there are reports in the news about something in Israel, but we couldn't get the reaction of the Israeli government because it's Sabbath there in Israel. So he loved those things. So, then in America, they say, well, it's a Jewish state. We'll have to wait till after the Sabbath to get their answers or things like that. And just by the fulfillment of the prophecies, and from 1956 to today, one of my dreams, one of the things I would like to do is to take Rav Soloveitchik's Kol Dodi Dofek and update it from 1956 to 2023 or whatever it will be when I get there, hopefully. And one of my updates is that, dear Rabbi Soloveitchik, you know what has happened since then? Since then, the Christians have ceased to deny that the Jewish people are still alive, that God has not left the Jewish people, that there's so much Kiddush Hashem in being in Israel and having a Jewish state. So this, I don't think we can, I don't think we should ignore the positive aspects of the state of Israel because of the negative aspects. And what that leaves us with is a complexity. Yes, there's a complexity. Do you want to deal with complex situations? No, you don't. Okay. So you don't support Israel, or you're not excited about Israel, you're negative towards Israel. Maybe you're protecting yourself, but is it solving anything? Is it helping Israel get any better? I'm not sure. What are you doing by not recognizing or not dealing with the complexity? So yes, I do think there is a complexity. I do think there's positive and negative, and we should try to influence and correct what is negative, but I cannot identify with saying that because of these negative aspects, I am not excited about the state of Israel. And I would even ask, who is more religious? We like to, give people grades and all kinds of things in life, including in religiosity. is the person who, to retain, to preserve his religious identity, he kind of secludes himself and keeps to himself and wants to, because he doesn't want to be involved in things that are negative in the state of Israel and endanger his or his children's Jewish identity. Is he more religious? Or is a person who, you know what, he's taking a chance, but he's trying to be part of the positive aspects of the state of Israel, serving in the army, working and helping the financial situation and the economy, and helping Israel in all kinds of other ways, and at the same time trying to have a positive impact on the Jewish identity of the state. Which one of these two is so-called more religious? I will leave that question open, and I will end my remarks on this point with the following, and then I'd like to hear if you'd like to add or disagree or whatever you'd like to say. And I would say the following: there is historically an ongoing and a very long-lasting argument about what Geulah, what redemption will look like. Will it be in natural ways, or will it be with supernatural miracles? Like when Yeshayahu, the prophet Yeshayahu, says that the wolf and the lamb will live together. Do we expect wolves to stop eating lambs? Or is it, as the Rambam says, a parable about strong nations not eating, not devouring, not hurting, not using their power in an unjust way against weaker nations? And we don't have an answer, we don't have a proof which one is right. And the Rambam himself, who says that everything in the time of the Geulah will be natural and not supernatural, and the difference will be that the Jewish people will be independent in an independent kingdom and an independent statehood.
Mm-hmm.
The Rambam himself then goes on to say, but we don't know for sure, and when will we know? When it happens, that's when we'll figure out who was right and who was wrong. So I identify with that. But then what if I'm surprised? What if tomorrow there's a supernatural miracle and there are in some miraculous way, all the Jews are brought to Israel literally on the wings of some kind of miracle, and money grows on the trees, and people's deformities are healed, and illnesses are healed, and so on, all kinds of prophecies like that, and the beautiful waters will spread from Jerusalem and heal the Dead Sea. We just learned that this last Shabbat in Yechezkel. Beautiful. Well, I'm not going to stand on my feet and say to the world and say to Hashem, no, that's not I didn't agree with that opinion. I saw redemption coming the other way. Take it back. I don't want this redemption. It's not the one I agreed with. If my opinion is proven wrong, okay, I'll accept redemption any way it comes. And I feel that the people who are rejecting it are saying, well, it's not the redemption I was expecting. I was expecting everything to be beautiful and perfect in one day. It's not working that way, so I'm not going to join in on it. And I don't think that's a good thing. By the way, I think I would prefer a human, natural redemption than to a miraculous, supernatural redemption, because I don't need God to prove to me that God can make miracles and change the world. I'm still waiting for man to prove to me that he can get things right, mankind can get things right and make the world a better place. So I'd rather have redemption, man-made redemption with the help of God, than have a God-made redemption. So that's my reason for that opinion. But if God proves me wrong, I'll take whatever he gives us. So to try and put it all in one. So I agree that there is truth to the criticism, but we cannot ignore the powerful positive aspects of the state of Israel. Yes, there are even certain dangers in being part of Israel with the religious kind of mishmash that maybe endangers our ability to keep things clear where our boundaries are. But this is what we have to do to be part of this miracle that we are living in, and try to have a positive influence on those things that are not good enough. And I'm going to open my ears and shut my mouth and maybe hear what other people want to say.
Let's start from the premise that any human project is a work in progress, and is by definition not perfect. So we have a project called Israel, and the question is whether we are making progress towards a particular goal. We will never get to that ideal goal unless, of course, some vision, some aspect of redemption occurs. But the question in my mind is, we have certain structures, we have a certain way of being in this country. Are we making progress towards a better way of being in this country? And if that is the case, if we are making progress, then that's all we can expect humanly.
Are we? Would ask a religious person, is Jewish identity strengthening or weakening? Or is it going to extremes? People are choosing either I will be totally religious or I will be totally against having my children having any Jewish education. I can still make a case for someone who says not only is it not getting better, it's getting worse. I don't think they're right, but it's not scientific, Mr. Scientist. It's not scientific. This is social sciences.
Yeah, sure. But there's always the question of, are we making progress or not? Towards what goal? And yeah, I would agree with you that in our current environment, it's not clear that we are making progress. I agree completely with that. I think that's why a lot of people, that's the fundamental reason why a lot of people are very, very upset, is because perhaps we are not making progress. Perhaps we're doing exactly the opposite.
Please jump in.
Yeah, I think on my side, I think that we are making some progress in different way. And if you look at every technology that Israel and the startup nation bring to the world, it means that we bring something to the world. We can be religious, not religious, but the Jewish spirit and what we do for the technology for the world is a kind of tikkun olam, because we bring something which is very, very important for many countries, and we can see that a lot of things are coming from not only from Israel, but there are still some things that are coming to Israel. So I think it's a kind of progress that we do. Maybe there are a lot of room of improvement, but it's not perfect. But there are still a lot of things that are come from Israel, from the Jewish people, and so in that way, I think that we progress step by step, but we do some progress, and I think it's very important for the world. And if you look at the size of the country, if you look at all that we bring compared to the very big nation like the United States, like Europe, and so on, I think that the share of what we bring to the world is huge. It's very huge compared to the number of people we are in Israel. So I think it's a kind of progress, and it's kind of some examples that we can give also to the world in different domains. It could be technology, but it could be also other things. And for me, it's very positive. So I think it's a step. And I remember someone who told me, you have to start doing something, and even if you don't go at the end of your project, you start to do it, and it's very important to starting something. And right. I think that this is on the Israeli spirit. I don't say Jewish, but I think it's on our gene, that you start to do something, even if you don't go at the end, at least you start. Maybe you will fail, but you will create another thing, and then you will progress and have more and more things that you will bring positively to the world. So I think that this is the way. This is what I appreciate, this our Jewish identity and what we have here in Israel.
Thank you, Natai. I appreciate what you said. I agree with you. I think that I was just teaching a different group today about Yitzchak Avinu, who digs wells in Eretz Yisrael, and then the local or the Palestinians of that time, these are Plishtim from the Negev, were struggling against what he was doing, and what he was doing was digging wells. Now, who's going to benefit from wells? I don't dig a well in my own backyard. It's good for everyone. I think that Israel, Am Yisrael, has that character And in Israel, we have that character. We try to do things that are good, and then they're good for us and they're good for others, and we spread them in the world. That's a positive thing. I think part of the religious argument is that religious? Meaning, if we only care about mitzvot, and all the rest is only to make a living, parnuse, just to get parnasa, then it's not a value. Values are mitzvot, Shabbat, even ben adam lechavero, chesed. Those are values. But work and technology and that's chiloni. That's not religious. And I think that's where some of our differences are. That we see those as part of the positive aspects of what is important and valuable and positive about Israel, also in a religious significance, while others don't see the religious significance of that. I think that's part of why we have these arguments. So maybe the arguments are based in very core values, and what we're seeing is just the branches and the leaves of these differences in values.
I'll jump in for a minute, Rabbi. Everybody hear me okay? Yes, good. I think Israel has a huge benefit to the world and to individuals. We travel back and forth enough to know how things are in the secular world of America, where the number one hate crime is always against Jews. I think that's true in much of Europe as well. So even if you want to blend in and forget about being Jewish, they'll remind you it's there. And when you set foot in Israel, it really is like you take a deep breath and relax. You're kind of home and surrounded by Jewish stuff. It's an amazing immersion therapy, if you will. And I don't care if somebody is religious and wants to go to shul 3 times a day or just wants to be on the beach in Tel Aviv. They're going to feel it. It's part of the atmosphere. It's part of who we are, who the state is. Jews are, I think, hardwired to try to make the world a better place. When they try to do that without the Torah, they often mess it up, but they try. And I think the positives will always outweigh the negatives, and some of the negatives may be a matter of perception. We do tend to try to take something good and make it perfect, and that doesn't always go well. But I will remain very optimistic about what Israel does for the world.
Thank you. On the one hand, I feel that sometimes being with a multitude of Jews, it's like there's a pasuk that says Mikveh Yisrael Hashem. Like I feel like you said immerse, and I feel sometimes like it's a mikveh. Am Yisrael is a mikveh. You immerse yourself in Am Yisrael.
Are you drowning?
The danger of that is, of course, like you say, you put your, you have in Galut, you have your antennas up. You come to Israel, you can put the antennas down, and then you need your antennas to be religiously, spiritually, active and growing and so on. And that's a certain danger about it. But yeah, that's not to disagree with what you were saying. Vakasha. Eliezer.
I'd like to agree completely with some of what Michael said. In the years before we came to Israel to live, I would periodically visit every 2 or 3 years. My grandfather lived in Israel, and I would periodically come to drop in on him for a little while. And it was always, after living, spending 2 years in Canada or the United States, it was always a relief to come here and to get a realistic perspective of what goes on in Israel and what the world is all about. Because living abroad for 2 years at a time was just, you just get so fed up with nonsense from outside about what's going on in Israel. And it was just always refreshing to come to Israel and be recalibrated if you will. So I can certainly identify with what Michael is saying. But I think that the context of, I think we're missing a little bit in the context of what Rabbi Tzvi is talking about. And that is not that we're technologically making progress or that we're doing tikkun olam or this or that. That's, that's wonderful. Of course, it's wonderful. It's terrific. And that's very much progressing. But I think the context that we're trying to discuss here is, are we progressing religiously? Isn't that the context? And I, far be it from me to say anything about that, because I'm not, very far from that sort of mindset. But I think that's the context that we want to talk about, and not, technologically, yeah, we're all whiz kids and everything else, but I think we're missing the context.
No, but you're right. But I think that the other aspects are also of religious value. The fact that the state of Israel contributes to Tikkun Olam is of religious value. It's not the only religious value. I don't think that a Jewish state that only cares about Tikkun Olam and doesn't care about its own Judaism, I don't think it will be, I think it'll be very weak or even worse, but we need that Jewish identity. But at the same time, the other aspects are also part of what I see as religious, having religious significance. That we as a nation care about these things and are active on these things.
Do you hear me, by the way?
Yes, we do.
I feel with my whole being that we have an obligation to try, and I don't really see the difference. I mean, like, as Jews, we have the obligation to try according to what we're commanded to by Hashem. But to sit back and I'm losing this. Do you still hear me?
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Okay. To sit back and just say, oh, well, I'm being a good Jewish robot, I don't think that that's the point at all. And we have an obligation to live here and to try to make the country an honor to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I think it's very simple.
Okay.
Well,
Yes.
if when you look at being here part-time and everything, and I speak to some people, groups and things, and they always say, well, Israel's not very religious anyway, it's very secular. And I went, no, I said, there are a lot of secular people in Israel, but their secular is very different from the secular, let's say, in the United States. I mean, on Friday, you can feel Shabbat coming on, and my neighborhood, there's a mixture of religious and not religious people, but they're always getting ready for Shabbat one way or another. Maybe flowers, having family over, lighting candles, and then they may go do what they want to do. They may go to the beach on Shabbat, but it is Shabbat. It is something.
Excuse me, Etta, somebody's computer is making noise. Maybe mute yourselves, and that way we'll hear Etta and not other background noises. Go ahead, Etta.
Okay, so is that the end of it? Anyway, it's that Israel may, it may not be the perfect religious place for everybody, and who defines what is religious enough. We have that even among the religious, you have disputes about what is religious enough and everything. So, I mean, I'm always pleased, when my non-religious neighbors and everything will ask a question or something, or you go to the gas station and they tell you Shabbat Shalom or, Chag Sameach or something, you feel it there. People are doing something, and that's a start. You look at a seed and you don't know where it will go. You don't know where their children will go. And I think that's like the opportunity for growth, and the opportunity anywhere, but in the States, secular is secular. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
they'll go out for Yom Kippur and have a hamburger or a cheeseburger or whatever. So,
Right. Actually, for me, I did live. I mean, I've lived 6 years of my 6 years of my life in America, but I don't remember much of them except for one, which was I was in middle school, ninth grade, and one of the things I remember very strongly from that experience was Yom Kippur, because I was, not that I could expect otherwise. We were in Chicago, not far from West Rogers Park. And, I get up on Yom Kippur morning and go with my father to shul, or at night, whatever it was. And, everything is as usual, the buses and the stores and everything is like any other weekday. And, just being in Israel and experiencing this amazing feeling of Yom Kippur is just one example. I would say that one of the religious arguments today is I feel that in the last decade or 2 or 3, the Israeli secular society has become, in some ways, more traditional, maybe in some ways going to extremes, either being totally disconnected or anti, or being more traditional, not necessarily committed religiously, but more traditional. You hear about Parashat Shavua on the radio and all kinds of songs, singers connected to Jewish identity and values, and so on. And, just take one example. If you followed a week or 2 ago, the Eurovision, so you have a young lady who happens to live in Ra'anana, singing a song. I don't know if that song had any Jewish value about it. I could criticize her and other things, and the show was on Shabbat, but she did not use her phone while she sang on Shabbat, and all kinds of other things. So, it's this kind of mix. And I see the mix as positive because it's on the background of it's that or nothing. So, and I see it as positive. And then there are other religious people and rabbis who say, don't give that any positive feedback, because you're giving them legitimacy to be partial, to be traditional and not committed, and so on. And I think they're doing something that's causing so much damage. Instead of encouraging something that is partial, they're telling them, okay, what you're doing is no good, and they're not going to come any closer because of that. They just become more against. So this is part of what's going on. And I think it has to do with another point I'd like to make. I would ask ourselves halachically, okay, so I have my religious reasons why I appreciate the state of Israel, and it's a fulfillment of things that were written in the Torah and in the prophets. I get that, but halachically, can I be participant? Can I cooperate with a state which is committing how do you say avirot, committing transgressions against halakha? I'm friendly with these people. I talk to them about it. Can I take part in this? Maybe I should just, maybe halachically, with all the pain that it would include, I have to separate myself from Israeli society, because otherwise I am joining him. I'm taking part in all kinds of things that are against halakha. And I can't force them not to do them, and I can't force them to stop it. So therefore, I shouldn't take any part in it. And I think it's necessary to say that the halachic, I think the halachic guideline should be not am I participant at any level in something that's wrong, because I am by being part of the state, but am I causing it to be even worse, or am I making it a little, I'm not even going to say better, but less negative? Meaning, take the classical question. Someone stops, it happens. It's happened to me several times in life. Car stops next to you on the street on Shabbat and asks for directions where to go. Okay, do you help them or not? One of it is a humanistic question, because a person is asking for your help. And the other is a halachic question, because I'm telling him where to drive on Shabbat. But the question, anyway. One of the questions is he's driving anyway, and I'm not causing him to transgress Shabbat more, maybe less. Or if a person comes to shul on Shabbat by car, I'm not going to stand up and say this is permissible, but am I going to discourage it, and then he's going to stay home, cook himself a meal, light himself a cigarette, write a letter or whatever, and when he drives to shul, he's not transgressing Shabbat more than he would at home. at least for the hour or two that he's going to be in shul, he's not transgressing
Right.
Shabbat. So, and I'm strengthening his Jewish identity. So I'm helping him strengthen his own Jewish identity. So I think that again, like I said before, if I want to safeguard myself, I want to feel good with myself and feel clean. So I don't want to have anything to do with another Jew who's not keeping everything, then I will separate myself. But if I want to be constructive, I have to jump into this pool that is complex, that has complexity, and it's more intricate than just saying, I'm going to try and keep everything. I'm not going to do anything that's questionable. And then again, the question is it about me, my religious obligations and my being careful not to transgress anything religiously? Or is it about the people of Israel? And also there are other values, there are other Jewish values, such as Ahavat Israel, and being positive towards other Jews, making sure it's even pikuach nefesh. Because if we fall apart into different social segments of Israeli society, it's mamash pikuach nefesh, because then we are weaker. And as you've seen in the last months, our enemies immediately pick up on it. And so there is a religious price that we pay for it, but there's another religious price in the opposite direction. So we have to be aware of these things. At the same time, I would say, yes, we should. When I reject someone's position and I don't agree with their conclusion, that doesn't mean that what they're saying carries no weight at all. And maybe it's important to listen to the criticism in the sense of at least trying to be careful. Yes, where we are not constructive and we are only causing someone to transgress more, and there's no need to do that, let's keep away from it. Let's be aware that our involvement in the state of Israel also does have an aspect and an influence of making the boundaries between religion and Judaism in a different way. As I've said several times in the past, it's not my own statement. It's the only religion where you just have to be Jewish, So do we have to keep the Torah or just be a little Jewish? So yes, it does cause confusion. It does have a negative influence on certain people at certain times. And let's try and be clear on these things. Let's try and give the message clearly. But there's no running away from the fact that it's going to be complex, and the complexity is going to take a certain toll. Let's try and minimize it while we still strongly identify with the people of Israel and with the state of Israel. Go ahead, Tova. Tova, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I listen to everything everybody's saying. I agree with everything, but I just want to make a point, and that is the educational system in Israel, as we all know, is divided. We have religious schools, we have non-religious schools. Now, when we compare the books that we are complaining about the Arabs not teaching what we want them to teach, and the religious people not teaching what the government wants them to study. So if we look at what the non-religious schools are teaching or not teaching, we'll see that the divide is getting greater and greater. And a kid from a high school, a non-religious high school, has very little knowledge of Judaism. He knows about the Chagim because the stores are closed. They say on the news that there's going to be a Chag, but they themselves are not really involved. They may say Chag Sameach, but they don't know what the Chag is about. The knowledge of Judaism is minimal, and I'm saying it from firsthand knowledge because I went to non-religious high school. I tried to be very nice. I wasn't Bnei Akiva, but I tried to be very nice and go to the Tzofim and the Shomer HaTzair. But of course, I got up when they started music Friday night. I said, I thank you very much. I said whatever I have to say, and I left. The thing is that they're not teaching, in the schools, they're not teaching anything about Judaism. They will teach you about Hinduism. They'll teach you about the Confucius. They'll teach you about any other religion but Judaism. So I think that the reason we have this tremendous divide now in the society is because they're not teaching in the non-religious schools, they're not teaching Judaism. And I mean it. They teach in Sefer Shoftim, they teach like this. They teach in Sefer Shoftim and Sefer Yoshua. They teach a little about Yoshua. No, they teach about Sefer Shoftim. They teach about Gidon. They teach about Shimshon, and that's about it, because they were fighters. That's good for the army. But everything else, no values are not. The values are not there. Nobody's teaching them.
Okay,
They don't know
well,
this.
first of all, it's true about some of the schools, and there's a diversity of schools, with different levels of Jewish education. And I'll just, one example from close to home. One of my members of my family is the Tanakh coordinator for the middle school of one of the public non-religious schools in Ra'anana. It's because he's not the kind of guy who comes in with negative messages towards people who are not religious, but they he didn't push to get the position, but he taught Tanakh, and they loved him, and they asked him to take this. And so, and I was saying there are different schools. There are all kinds of things. There are struggles about it. There's a group of parents who, you bring anything religious to the school, they're against Hadata. And there are parents who want to bring things in. You come with religious people to teach religion in a non-religious school, there's more opposition. You have people who are more middle ground who can teach Jewish identity in a non-religious school. There's more openness to acceptance. So I'm just saying that's also part of the complexity. And yes, that is part of it. There are different people and different groups in the society. And sometimes, as I said before, sometimes being aggressive about it is pushing them even farther away. So that's not the way to do it. If we have time, I would like to share with you, okay, let's try this. I tried to share with you one more point. Here we are. This is Rav Kook, okay? And I want to take one more point from the Haredi attitudes, and he says the following. I'll translate. Otam Haredim asher itnagdu el hatzionut, the Haredim who opposed Zionism, hem asher tzerfuha. Soref is can I call him a smithy, goldsmith or silversmith? So what would be the word? What would be the verb of soref? He cleanses, he refines, purifies.
They purified it, yes. They made,
So the Haredim, says Rav Kook, who opposed Zionism, they purified Zionism, and they took away v'esiru chelek gadol misigea. They took away some of the. There's a word in English. You always teach me this word in English, and I forget it.
What is not silver, what is not gold? Something that's not pure. Sig.
Right. Yeah, right.
Impurities, the impurities. I don't know what else.
Someone here has taught me the word in English in the past. What is the word?
Scrap.
There's the word gross, P-R-O-S-S.
I don't know. Somebody has told me a different word in the past. Anyway, you get the idea that the Haredim, by struggling against and opposing to Zionism, purified it from a large part of its negative aspects. Ad asher heviu, until they have brought it through their negative actions, to the level that, not that it's perfect, but it's close enough to be not, he says the following, Zionism was so general, so universal. You see what Herzl's vision was for a state in Israel, a Jewish state. It was a European state for Jews. It had nothing to do with Judaism. It was a European 19th century state that he wanted to create in Israel. And if Zionism was only that, it would be totally thrown away from the spirit of the house of Israel, from Judaism. And he says the external aspect of building the nation, the external aspect of building a nation, like the external aspect of building all kinds of things that man does, it comes from the
revelation of
different powers being revealed, that they are not the content For example, he said elsewhere in this piece that this is taken from, Rav Kook said, let's say we want to build. Please, someone suggest what building do you want to be built? Hospital, shul, school, court, whatever it is that you want to build. The builders don't have to have knowledge of medicine or of law or religion. They come, their powers are external. They bring the stones and put them in place. They build the buildings. That is not the content. The content will appear when everything is in place. Then the content will appear with all its qualities. So Rav Kook is saying, by the Haredim opposing to Zionism, okay, I'm not going to go as far as Rav Kook said here. I wouldn't say today. Rav Kook himself, by the way, made at least 2 attempts to bring the Haredim into Zionism. One attempt, there's even a letter in Yiddish that Rav Kook publicized, calling them to join the Zionistic movement because he was hoping that then they could influence Zionism, but they didn't. They didn't answer to his call. And then he tried to create another movement, which he called Jerusalemism. Like Sion is Jerusalem. So you call one movement is Zionism, and one is Jerusalemism. He called it the flag of Jerusalem, Deged Yerushalayim, which he intended to be the religious Zionism in the sense that, there's the external building of a Jewish state, and there is the internal spiritual content of the Jewish state. He did not succeed in that. He was not, I don't think Rav Kook was a very, had great strength in organizing and putting
He
together.
wasn't a politician. He wasn't a politician.
Herzl's strengths were not Rav Kook's strengths, and Rav Kook's strengths were not Herzl's strengths. So the flag of Jerusalem never picked up. It started and it dwindled, it died out. But Rav Kook's teachings and his students later on, carried out to some extent his vision. But what the point is that, whenever there's always a tension between being inclusive and then making things blurry, and you're not clear. I will take the example of Kinol David. We really strive to be totally inclusive. And sometimes it gives off the wrong idea that we're not careful about halacha. People can come into Kinol David and they see the women doing something or the mechitza being lower than what they're used to or whatever it is, and they'll come to me and they'll say, is this halachic? And they don't think that maybe what they're saying is disrespectful or insulting or derogatory. And my first reaction is, you're not asking the right question. If we're doing it, it means that we believe it's halachic. So the way you should ask it is, please explain to me your halachic perspective on this. That's a proper question. Mm-hmm. And you can disagree with me, but obviously we have such a perspective. But that's why in Kinol David, I instituted that we have a halakha at the end of the davening on Shabbat. It's also an opportunity to teach halakha, which is positive in its own right, but it's also making a statement without saying the words, we are an Orthodox community. It's saying, Ian Tick coined the phrase that we are the unorthodox Orthodox community, which is a great way to word it. But we have to also say that we are the Orthodox community. So instead of saying we are an Orthodox community, we just teach halakha, and that's giving a message in itself. But yes, there is this complexity of, if you're inclusive, you're giving a message about being wishy-washy. That's not the message you mean to give. That's the message that some people take. And Rav Kook said about Hillel and Shammai, there's the story about the 3 converts. Convert for the wrong reasons, for reasons not halakhically valid. One wants to be the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. That's only Torah shebichtav and not Torah shebal peh. And Shammai rejected them and threw them out. And Hillel was inclusive and accepted them and taught them until they understood their mistake. And Rav Kook speaks about Hillel and Shammai, and he says that there's an advantage and a disadvantage to each of them. Because Shammai's advantage is he's being clear, he's saying what's right and what's wrong. He's not giving a mixed message. And Hillel can be giving a mixed message because maybe they'll get the message that everybody, you know what, everything goes. You want to convert and be Kohen Gadol, you want to convert only to Asher B'Tah, everything goes. So on the other hand, Hillel has an advantage and Shammai has a disadvantage because Shammai rejects people and he could push them away. And Hillel knew how to accept them and be inclusive and then teach them and enable them to understand what the Torah is really saying. So the same thing I would say here. I am not becoming Haredi, but I don't think that there is no positive aspect of their energies in Israeli society. I have a lot to say about what I think that is being done negatively. This is not a statement about all the Haredim. There's no such thing. I am not making a generalization, but many Haredim, I would say, are doing things that cause damage, or at least some Haredim and some Haredi leaders and some whatever. Let's not get into it. But those who are doing something negative, I think is negative, but there is also a constructive aspect to what they're doing. So even when I argue with them, it's not all or nothing. And I think there's something to be taken from this argument, from both sides of the argument. I'm going to stop here if anyone else wants to comment.
I just want to thank you for sending the letter about the Eruv Tavshilim. It was very good, it was concise and was to the point. Thank you very much. All my questions were answered.
Thank you. Thank you for the feedback.
I had a quick response to the comment before from Tova about the school. And I don't think that's a localized problem in Israel. It's becoming almost a worldwide problem, as I see it, with you want to call it the progressive movement or whoever is on that side of the argument, that they want to suppress and deny the value of any religious influence. As far as I can tell, in the United States, it's mainly directed against Christians. Although the New York Times has been acting out in their pages against the Hasidim for a while. But the idea that you can get values from the Bible or the Torah that can influence your life seems to be anathema to a lot of people in the secular world. And maybe it's because it's harder to control people that have a deep sense of core values that they don't get just from watching CNN or whatever. But it's a much bigger problem than just Israel. And I think the world would be a better place if we could get back to teaching values. Question is, how do you do that? Whose values? And how do you push back?
I would just add that I see a positive aspect in the following. I think secular Jews, again, not to make a generalization, but some secular Jews, somewhere between some and many, not all, are more liberal towards other religions than towards Judaism.
Yeah.
Because other religions are not a threat to them. There's no chance they're going to become Christian or Muslim or Buddhist. But Judaism, that's scary. That might influence their children. So even though they're negative, I feel that sometimes it covers some kind of awareness that this is mine. I'm connected to this, and therefore I have to be more wary about this one. So, and who knows? It maybe in the long run that can have some kind of positive influence. And if so, then we have to, like you said, Michael, we have to ask ourselves what is the best way for us to behave now, so that we can enable that process to make its natural, take its natural course, and at least not push it back.
Yes.
there's
Okay.
a danger of having a superiority complex, which you know, if people look around and think that they're the ones that know everything, then there's a big risk for that, big danger.
Yeah.
Well, that going around.
But not, and it is, not in the sense of knowing everything, but absolutely, we should always also be attentive and listen to what other people are saying. But at the same time, we try to have influence in the direction that we believe in. And yes, that also causes damage when we give over an aura of knowing everything and having all the truth. That also pushes people backwards.
What if you do?
The art is to pull the best from each strain and combine them.
Sometimes you have to proactively show someone that you're willing to listen to them. And listening doesn't mean keeping your mouth shut while they're speaking. It means proactively showing that you're listening, that you're trying to understand, that you're trying to learn something from them. Show them that. Sometimes that's what's necessary for them to be willing to have a discussion with you, even before they start proactively listening to you, like you're proactively listening to them.
Yeah, I just make an anecdote. I had we all have blessings from our parents. One of my biggest blessings from my parents is that both my parents were able to bring out the best in people. Always to bring out the best in people, and that's why I say that, you know, whatever group we're dealing with, there's always something good in whatever group we're dealing with, and the art is to bring out that good and to understand that goodness. And to use it to improve ourselves.
Absolutely, and at the same time, I would also like to enrich them with something good that I have that they could gain from.
Absolutely.
But when we argue with people that are not observant, that the problem is that we don't have the same material to discuss. We don't have the same, because we don't come from the same background. So it's very difficult when I will bring something, let's say, from the Bible that doesn't mean anything to them. That's no proof at all.
So you have to go back to something that's more.
We're back to nothing.
Okay, you have to go back to square.
To what?
Square one.
What am I going to back to? The Roman way of thinking, to the Greek way of thinking? What am I going to go back to? What am I?
No, Tova.
Good question.
Tova, we're sharing the same auditorium, and I come from a totally different place, but we can still share the same auditorium.
Okay, we can, because you are willing to say, okay, what do you know that I don't know? Tell me what you're talking about, right? You're willing to listen to what I have to say, my perspective, right? But most of the time,
exactly correct.
Okay, but
That's exactly correct.
I have met people who said, I'm not interested in what you have to tell me. So where do I go from there?
What is causing them to be that way, and how can I influence that? For instance, what I have found in life is that sometimes the way for me to influence someone to be willing to listen to me is by listening to them.
Okay, so they tell you. So the answer is like this. לא אכפת לי מהיהדות. אני לא רוצה לשמוע על זה. I don't care about Judaism. I don't want to hear about it. And that's it. Okay. Where do I go from there? So I say, okay, היה נעים מאוד. It was very pleasant to talk to you. Goodbye. Have a nice day. I don't have any, what am I going to say?
Okay.
What do I say? I don't know.
I want to give you, I don't want to interfere with the other threads here, but, you know, I've had some, shall we call them discussions at some of the political demonstrations. And, you know, you get, one hand here, one hand there, and you get into a big, no, but there's so much that we have in common. Come on. We both, you know, people come to me and said, you know, I'm totally against what you're doing. You're right. I'm left. You're an anarchist. You're, you know, whatever. I guess I am an anarchist, you know, but then I say, no, come on, look, we're standing on the same ground. We live in the same country. Of course, we have things in common. We could, if we want to, disagree on tons of things. We do.
Right.
But
No
we also
problem.
have lots of things in common. And that's what we have to start with, is to have things in common and build up from that rather than tearing down from what we disagree on.
That's true, but the question is, what do we have in common? Is your knowledge of Judaism the same as his? Can you discuss the same ideas in Judaism that he can? He doesn't know what you're talking about. He has no idea. I was
Well,
asked
there's
the
always
following-
stuff that we have in common. Always
Okay.
stuff that we have in common.
I was asked the following question. I was asked, he said, I know that you cannot put on light on Shabbat. I said, what do you mean I cannot put on? You're the same Jew as I am. Why can't I put on? And you said, because you're religious. And so where do you go from there? In other words, there's a division. A non-religious person feels that since I'm religious, I don't put on light, but since he is not religious, he doesn't know anything about it, doesn't have to know anything about it. What do you answer such a person?
Excuse me, it's after 10. I'd like to let people
Sorry.
have the freedom,
Good night.
the
Thank
freedom
you.
to leave.
Thank you.
So Tova, let's, I still think there's what to continue with this. Let's continue it.
Shabbat shalom. Chag sameach to everybody. Be well.
Chag sameach,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank
Chag
you.
sameach.
Sorry. Chag sameach. Bye.